There's something you used to love. Maybe it was a place, a person, a hobby. Something that, when you were doing it, made you feel like you were exactly where you were supposed to be. And now, you do the same thing. You go to the same place. You're with the same people, and something is missing. Not obviously. Not dramatically. There's no grief in it, exactly. Just a kind of flatness. Like someone turned the saturation down on everything you used to find vivid. You tell yourself you're tired, that you've just been busy, that it will come back. And sometimes it almost does, a brief flicker of the old feeling, just enough to remind you of what it was, before it goes quiet again. You've probably wondered if something is wrong with you, if you've changed in some way that can't be undone, if this is just what getting older feels like. But the loss of the ability to enjoy things is not a mystery. It has a mechanism, a precise neurological explanation for why the things that once lit you up are now producing only a faint signal where a strong one used to live. And understanding that mechanism is the beginning of finding your way back. Let's trace this carefully, because the experience is more specific than just feeling low. It isn't that nothing matters. You still care about the people you love. You still have opinions, preferences, things you'd rather do than not do. It's more like the gap between wanting and feeling has become very wide. You want things. You can describe what you used to feel. You know intellectually that this meal is good, that this moment is beautiful, that this achievement matters. But the feeling itself, the immediate embodied warmth of it, arrives muted, or delayed, or not at all. And that gap between knowing something is good and actually feeling it as good is one of the loneliest experiences a person can have. Because it's invisible. From the outside, your life may look the same. Or even better, more achieved, more stable, more full. But inside, you're watching your own experience through slightly fogged glass. Present but not quite touching. This flatness starts to affect things quietly. You stop suggesting plans because the anticipation doesn't feel like anticipation anymore. It feels like effort without guarantee of return. You find yourself seeking louder stimulation, more scrolling, more noise. More distraction, not because you enjoy those things, but because they produce just enough signal to temporarily interrupt the blankness. And then the blankness returns. Heavier, sometimes for the interruption. You begin to wonder if you've become someone who is simply harder to reach. Less alive to experience than you used to be. The self-talk that follows is precise and unkind. I'm ungrateful. I have everything I need and still nothing feels like enough. Something is fundamentally wrong with me. But none of that is accurate. Nothing is fundamentally wrong with you. What's happening has a name, and it isn't about gratitude. It's about what prolonged stress, pressure, and emotional suppression do to the specific neural system, responsible for generating the feeling of reward. Here is something worth saying plainly. The inability to enjoy things is not an attitude problem. It is not ingratitude. It is not depression in its fullest clinical sense, though it shares some of its textures. It is a physiological state, the result of specific changes in brain chemistry and neural function produced by sustained stress, chronic demand, or the long-term suppression of emotional experience. The brain system responsible for pleasure and motivation has been running under load for a long time. And like any system run under sustained load without adequate recovery, it has begun to function below its baseline. Not broken, depleted, and depletion is not a character state. It is a temporary recoverable condition, with specific causes and specific correctives. The person you were, the one who felt things vividly, who had enthusiasms and genuine anticipation, that person isn't gone. The neural pathways that produced those experiences are still there. They just need the conditions to reactivate, conditions that chronic stress and emotional suppression have been systematically removing. Understanding what those conditions are requires understanding what happened to the system in the first place. What you're experiencing has a precise neurological basis. The brain's reward and motivation system is centered on a neurotransmitter called dopamine, and more specifically, on a circuit called the mesolimbic pathway, sometimes called the brain's reward pathway. This system doesn't just generate pleasure after an experience. Its primary function is something more specific and more important. It generates anticipatory motivation, the felt sense of wanting, looking forward to, moving toward. It is the neural mechanism behind what researchers call hedonic tone, the baseline emotional coloring of experience. When the mesolimbic system is functioning well, ordinary moments carry a kind of intrinsic warmth. Good things feel genuinely good. The future carries a light quality of possibility. When it is depleted, when the system has been chronically overstimulated or chronically suppressed, that baseline warmth fades, not completely, not all at once. But steadily, over time, the signal gets quieter. There are two primary pathways to this depletion. The first is chronic stress and cortisol overload. Research by neuroscientist Bruce McEwen on allostatic load, the cumulative cost of sustained stress, shows that prolonged cortisol elevation progressively dampens dopaminergic activity in the mesolimbic system. The brain under chronic stress is a brain in survival mode. And survival mode doesn't prioritize enjoyment. It narrows attention to threat. It suppresses the reward system in favor of the vigilance system. Not because something is wrong, because the brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do under conditions of sustained pressure, keeping you alert, keeping you scanning, keeping you oriented to what might go wrong, at the direct expense of your capacity to feel what's going right. The second pathway is reward habituation, the process by which the brain's dopamine system downregulates its response to stimuli that are encountered repeatedly without novelty or meaning. This is most acute with high stimulation. Low-meaning activities, the kind that deliver a dopamine signal without delivering the depth that sustains it. Endless scrolling, passive consumption, numbing behaviors. Each one delivers just enough signal to interrupt discomfort. And each one trains the dopamine system to require more stimulation to produce the same response. Over time, natural pleasures, a walk, a conversation, a quiet afternoon, fall below the system's recalibrated threshold. They produce a signal the brain has learned to overlook. Here's the metaphor. Imagine your capacity for pleasure as a hearing range. Healthy, it picks up soft sounds. The warmth of an ordinary evening, the pleasure of something simple done well, the quiet satisfaction of being present. But after months of loud noise, the constant stimulation of high-demand living, the cortisol of chronic stress, the dopamine spikes of low-meaning scrolling, the range narrows. The soft sounds are still there, the hearing system is still intact. But the threshold has shifted. Only louder signals get through now. And natural life, most of the time, doesn't speak that loudly. The simple mental model, your brain's reward system has a sensitivity dial. Chronic stress turns it down. High stimulation numbing behaviors turn it down further. The work isn't to find louder experiences. The work is to turn the dial back up, slowly through specific conditions, until the soft sounds are audible again. Here are 5 principles for working with depleted hedonic tone, each grounded in the neuroscience of reward system recovery. The first move is subtraction, not addition. Most people respond to emotional flatness by seeking more stimulation, louder, faster, brighter inputs to break through the numbness. But high stimulation, low meaning activity is precisely what has been narrowing the reward system sensitivity. Adding more doesn't recalibrate the dial, it turns it down further. What to do? Begin reducing your daily intake of high stimulation, low meaning content. Not all at once, not with rigid restriction. Just intentionally less. Fewer reflexive scroll sessions. Fewer passive hours of consumption without presence. Replace them, gradually, with lower stimulation activities that require some form of engagement, even small. Why it works. Research on dopamine system recovery. By neuroscientist Anna Lemkin, her work on compulsive behaviors shows that periods of reduced high stimulation input allow the mesolimbic pathway to gradually recalibrate, restoring sensitivity to lower-level rewards that have become inaudible beneath the noise. You are not punishing yourself. You are turning down the volume so that quieter signals can be heard again. Real-life example. You spend your evenings watching content you don't particularly care about, not because it's enjoyable, but because it's loud enough to interrupt the flatness. You begin replacing one of those evenings with something that requires mild engagement. A book, a walk, cooking something you actually like to eat. It doesn't feel electric at first. That's not the goal yet. The goal is simply presence without numbing. Chronic stress depletes the reward system through sustained cortisol elevation. The corrective is not a vacation or a major life change. It is systematic, repeated recovery, small windows of genuine rest distributed across the day. What to do? Build 3 to 5 minutes of genuine, unstructured, unstimulated rest into each day. Not sleep, not meditation necessarily. Just stillness, without input, without output. A few minutes where you are not producing, consuming, or performing. Why it works. Research by neuroscientist Mary Helen Imerdino-Yan on restorative neural states shows that brief periods of wakeful rest, particularly without external stimulation, allow the default mode, network to process experience and the stress response system to partially deactivate. Even 3 minutes of genuine stillness produces a measurable reduction in cortisol and a partial restoration of mesolimbic baseline. Activity, small, consistent. Cumulative, real-life example. Between tasks at work, instead of immediately opening the next tab or picking up the phone, you sit for 3 minutes. Look at nothing in particular. Think about nothing in particular. Let the system catch its breath. It will feel uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is the stress response resisting the one thing that interrupts it. Stay anyway. Dopamine is particularly responsive to novelty, to experiences that are new, slightly unpredictable, or encountered for the first time. One of the reasons familiar pleasures stop producing pleasure is that the brain has habituated to them. Their signal is fully predicted, and therefore partially suppressed. What to do? Introduce one small novel experience per week. Not dramatic. Not expensive. A different route. A different cuisine. A conversation with someone you don't usually talk to. A skill attempted for the first time. Why it works. Research by psychologist Sonia Lubomirsky on hedonic adaptation shows that novelty, specifically the introduction of varied, unexpected positive experiences, is more effective at sustaining emotional well-being than the consistent repetition of even genuinely good things. The brain rewards the new, not because the familiar is bad, but because the new keeps the prediction system active, and an active prediction system produces dopamine. Real-life example. Every Saturday for 6 months you've gone to the same coffee shop, ordered the same thing. This Saturday you go somewhere you've never been. Order something you haven't tried. Sit somewhere different. The difference in how the morning feels is not dramatic, but it's real. And that signal, however quiet, is the reward system responding. The reward system doesn't respond equally to all pleasure. Research consistently shows that the deepest, most lasting activation of the mesolimbic pathway comes not from passive receiving of pleasure, but from effortful engagement with meaningful activity. The psychological term is eudaimonic well-being, the felt sense of meaning, growth, and authentic engagement, as distinct from hedonic pleasure, simple positive feeling. What to do? Identify one activity that meets two criteria. It requires genuine effort, and it connects to something you actually value, not something you think you should value. Something that, even in the flatness, still carries a small sense of this matters. Engage with it for 20 to 30 minutes per day, not for outcome, not for performance, simply for the engagement itself. Why it works. Research by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi on flow states shows that effortful engagement in meaningful activity produces the most robust and sustained dopaminergic activation, significantly more than passive or high-stimulation activities. The reward system was built to respond to genuine effort in service of genuine meaning. When you provide that, it responds. Not immediately, not all at once, but it responds. Real-life example. Used to write, nothing published, nothing serious. Just writing for yourself. You stopped. Life got busier. It felt indulgent. You begin again, not to produce anything, not to improve, not to show anyone. Just 20 minutes, 3 times a week, of doing the thing because it once meant something. The first few sessions feel mechanical. Then, somewhere in the third week, you notice, quietly, briefly, that you didn't want to stop when the time was up. That noticing is the dial moving. The inability to feel positive things fully is often accompanied by an equal inability to feel and process negative things. Suppressed emotional experience, grief unprocessed, anger unfelt, disappointment held in place, creates what some researchers describe as global emotional blunting. The numbing doesn't just target the difficult feelings. It targets the full emotional range. What to do? Create a regular small container for emotional processing 10 minutes. A few times a week with no agenda other than honest attention to what's actually there. This can be writing. It can be sitting quietly with a question. What am I actually feeling that I haven't acknowledged this week? Not to fix it. Not to analyze it. Just to feel it. Why it works. Research by psychologist James Pennebaker on expressive writing and emotional processing shows that giving language to suppressed emotional experience reduces physiological stress markers and restores emotional responsiveness over time. The blunting is, in part, a byproduct of suppression. What suppression costs in difficulty, it also costs in joy. Releasing the suppression, even in small, private, contained doses, begins to restore the full range. Real-life example. You realize you've been carrying something for weeks without fully acknowledging it. Not a crisis. Just a quiet accumulation of disappointment, tiredness, unmet expectation. You sit with it for 10 minutes. Name it honestly. Don't fix it or reframe it. Just let it be real. The next day, or perhaps the day after, something ordinary produces a feeling you haven't felt in a while, not euphoria. Just warmth. A small, real warmth. The dial moving. Here is the model. Your brain's reward system has a sensitivity dial. Chronic stress turns it down. High stimulation numbing turns it down further. Suppressed emotional experience narrows the range. You have not lost your capacity for joy. You have lost the conditions that allow it to register. Reduce the noise. Rest deliberately. Reintroduce novelty. Engage effortfully with what matters. Process what you've been holding, not as a program, not as a performance of recovery, as a slow, patient process of restoring the conditions under which feeling is possible until the soft sounds that were always there become audible again. The version of you that felt things vividly, that had genuine anticipation, that found ordinary moments genuinely beautiful. That version is not a younger, better you that you've somehow grown away from. It is the same nervous system, the same reward circuitry, the same capacity for depth and warmth. It has simply been running under conditions that were never designed for pleasure. And the remarkable thing about the brain is that it is not fixed in its current state. It is responsive, constantly updating, constantly being shaped by what you give it. What stimulation, what rest, what meaning, what honest feeling. The flatness you've been living in is not your permanent register. It is where you've been, not where you have to stay. The warmth you're looking for isn't in a louder experience or a more dramatic life. It's in the quiet, faithful work of giving your nervous system back the conditions it needs to feel. Start small. Start today. Start with something that requires just a little effort and carries just a little meaning. And wait patiently, without forcing for the dial to move. It will.